There's been no shortage of speculation about Donald Trump staging a comeback and running for re-election in 2024. But this time, it is former Vice President Mike Pence who might be mulling a run for president.
According to the New York Times, Pence has kept an arm's-length distance from Trump since leaving the White House, campaigning with midterm candidates Trump has written off and visiting early nominating states. Here to discuss are Jen Perelman, co-host of Generational Change on YouTube, and Rachel Bovard, policy director at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Thank you.
So, Rachel, what do you think? Is there any possibility, I'm not sure there is, that, Mike Pence could throw his hat into the ring and possibly, come out of a Republican primary process, Trump or no Trump? Isn't he just too damaged by, the perception that he betrayed Trump at the end or didn't do what he was supposed to do?
I definitely think there's a segment of the Trump base that looks at him that way. But I think more broadly, and what's more interesting to me is, you're seeing Mike Pence actually try to resurrect a pre-Trump model of Republican politics that I'm not sure, frankly, exists anymore. I don't know that there's a path for that type of Republican politics anymore. And what I mean by that is, sort of the traditional fusionist emphasis on a lot of issues that Trump sort of turned on their head, an emphasis on free trade, an emphasis on letting big business kind of get away with whatever they want, sort of a global international order, in the foreign policy space. All these things were sort of pre-Trump. I don't know that Pence has a viable path forward with an emphasis on these things. And he's certainly trying. I don't know that he's really broken with who he used to be. So that's what's more interesting to me is, can he actually carve out a lane in that regard? And my sense is no, not right now.
Well, Jen, what do you make of the alliances that Trump and Pence are making respectively in Georgia, where, Trump is frustrated with Purdue, with Kemp for not overturning the election, or however you want to characterize it, and Pence taking the more, upholding of democracy line of saying that there's certain rules that we have to abide. Is there an appetite? Is Pence anticipating that there is some appetite among even conservatives in Georgia for respecting basic election law and not participating in the big lie? What do you think the effect of the big lie broadly is going to be on this potential showdown?
It's interesting. I really see Georgia as sort of like this proxy war that's going on. And I think it'll say a lot regarding what happens there. But I agree that there's really not that much of a lane for Mike Pence because he's very niche to begin with. Like, I see him as very, very niche. And I don't see that as speaking to a broad enough group of people. But it almost seems to me that he's just going out of his way to be contrary. Whether or not that works, I don't know, but he's definitely going out of his way just to say, well, I'm going to do what opposite of what Trump did. But I don't know that that'll be enough to really make him stand out as something that's different than Trump, given that he stood by him as his lapdog for 4 years.
Rachel, who do you think are the non-Trump Republicans who are plausible candidates in 2024 who are speaking to the new kind of policy consensus that animates conservatives, the departure from the Pences of the world? Is it really just DeSantis, or are there others?
I think at this point, it almost, from an actionable standpoint, it really only is DeSantis, which is interesting because I don't think he necessarily has taken the steps that others have taken to sort of push out into the presidential primary. He seems to be holding back. But I think, to the point that Jen just made, I think she's right. You have a bunch of Republicans, Mike Pence included, who are defining themselves as not Trump. And that works for a little bit, right? But eventually you have to say what you are. And I think in many cases, the 2020 election, Biden tried that out, right? Biden, I think, tried to appeal to a lot of Republican voters by saying, well, I'm not Trump. I'm you want your politics to go back to boring, pick me. And, I don't think that that's working out for him necessarily very well either. So I don't know that anyone's actually carved out a sustainable lane to take on Trump. You look at people like Nikki Haley, for instance, who I don't think has, come out exactly in polar opposite of Trump, but has, carved a lane for herself that I think is distinct enough. And people are going to want to see, okay, what is it that you're for? And nobody's really put that platform out. No one is really willing, I think, to take a polar opposite stand of Trump, because Trump is still really powerful. And he's, again, the most, popular Republican in the party. And doing that at this stage, I think, has a lot of consequences that people, aren't yet willing to deal with. So we don't have anyone, I think, that is a foil yet, or a viable foil anyway, to Trump.
Well, Rachel, the counter argument to your point would be, that Biden's approval ratings might not be so hot right now, but he did get elected, and there was some appetite for a certain gray-haired vice president, a silver fox, if you will, who promised to return to normal. Is it completely unreasonable that Pence could be anticipating that there is an appetite for that, including among people who are, in fact, frustrated with Biden and his failure to pass much of anything at all over the last year or so, and who might have only gone over to the Democratic side because he presented himself as a moderate alternative to Trump? Is Pence a more moderate, genuinely conservative alternative to Trump?
I do think there is definitely a segment of the Republican Party that, just doesn't want the drama of Trump. That is a definite, problem that Trump has, I think, from a nationwide appeal, or at least a base appeal to Republican voters. What I don't know is how big that segment is, and if that segment is going to look at Mike Pence and be like, yes, this guy. Because again, take, the baggage away from Trump. What was popular about him to the base is that he was, from their perspective, fearless in the face of a lot of the culture wars, a lot of the excesses of business, a lot of the things that Republicans really wanted to see. And I don't know that Pence is really putting himself forward as the natural heir to those fights. And I think unless he's willing to do that, I don't know how big the appeal is of, well, I'm not that guy and I'm boring, so you don't have to watch the news every night. I don't know how big that appeal actually is.
Jen, do you think Democrats recognize, the danger they're in? They're looking to get really, really hurt in this upcoming election. Last time they had, Biden running as a moderate, a boring non-Trump alternative. Now, you might not have Trump in the race. You could decide not to run. You could have him, and he, the poll numbers for Biden are so low. He's going to have a fighting chance. He's not gone. He's not gotten rid of. He could absolutely come back. Do Democrats appreciate that? They're not even going to have a lot of the arguments they had last time to narrowly beat Trump.
I find the Democrats largely delusional. I don't know what they're seeing. I can say, what's interesting is I'm in Florida. So when you're talking about DeSantis, the Democrats here, they're actually thinking that there's a viable gubernatorial race for them this year. And DeSantis, as far as I can see, he's already won that, and he's running in 24 for president.
Absolutely.
And so our Democrats do not seem to be very aware, but then I also think that's partially intentional. They don't have anybody that they can put up against either Trump or DeSantis or any of those people, actually, that has a chance. And Biden, while he won, he barely won during a pandemic. And so I don't think that was that strong of a message that people sent, oh, yes, we really want this. That was never really clear. I think it was more that Trump lost than Biden won. And so I think we're going to see that coming back to bite them. And no, they are very seemingly blind about what's going on all around them.
Yeah, he barely won then, and now he's had years of, fair or not, no matter what you think, clearly people think it's gone badly with the economy, with Ukraine, Afghanistan, that things have not gone with COVID. Even things have not gone well. So he's going to be underwater trying to make the same case, and he only narrowly won last time. It just seems very, very concerning, or reason for concern if you're a Democrat. But I don't hear that a lot. Rachel, Jen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
We'll have more Rising right after this.